Currently, a bipartisan group of Senate negotiators is examining possible changes to asylum and humanitarian parole that would severely restrict access to these protections. These are part of negotiations right now to pass an emergency spending bill that has a deadline of the next several weeks to be accomplished. AILA is deeply concerned about any of these changes in the asylum and parole context because of the severe restrictions and likelihood it would do harm to asylum seekers and force them back into harm's way. The three major changes include elevating the legal standard to qualify for asylum under the credible fear interview context. Secondly, implementing a transit ban similar to what President Trump had done. And thirdly, stripping away from the executive branch, from the president, the authority to grant parole to individuals of group designation. As I mentioned before, AILA is deeply concerned about these changes and is hoping that senators will push back on them and not accept them. These changes to asylum and humanitarian parole are coming up now for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is vital that additional resources be provided to the federal government to be able to not only manage the border migration situation, but also to make improvements to the immigration system overall. And so border supplemental funding is also deemed part of this package. In addition, GOP leaders are insisting upon these policy changes in asylum and parole as a way of getting in the kinds of restrictions that they have long been calling for. And because there is less support right now in Congress to provide supplemental funding for Ukraine, and it's seen as something that's more important to Democrats, Republican leaders see an opportunity to hold the Ukraine funding in exchange for the changes they want on asylum and parole. It is absolutely critical that the United States ensure that migration to the U.S. southern border is managed effectively. But that has to be done through an all-of-government approach that looks at the other agencies that manage the immigration system, because these are all interconnected. And making sure that the flows coming to the U.S. southern border are handled effectively requires making sure the courts operate well, or that USCIS and Department of State can manage the number of visa requests that are coming through in an effective way. If those aren't done well, you see bottlenecks happening, and it affects migration to the U.S. southern border. In addition, I need to emphasize that the kinds of reforms the GOP leaders are demanding right now are not going to be effective in managing the southern border. Take, for instance, the idea of restricting and stripping away from the president the authority to designate parole for certain populations. That has already been shown under the president's current CHNV program and other designations to be an effective way to manage migration and to ensure that fewer people come to the southern border. The way to handle southern border migration is to ensure that ports of entry are adequately resourced, to provide more asylum officers to interview and screen people, and to make sure, as I mentioned before, that there's an all-of-government approach to make the entire immigration system work more effectively. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment, and we need all members to take action by clicking on AILA's Action Center to contact your member of Congress and tell them how to get immigration reform done right. You can also use social media and other methods at your disposal to influence Congress. What you want to do is to tell them to make sure the immigration system is resourced properly and is funded properly. But it has to ensure not only that migration is done effectively at the border, but also that there are adequate legal pathways for people to come to the country so that the whole system works effectively. And you want to make sure to tell them not to compromise on the asylum protections that everybody who comes to the United States should have access to.